Hello, Zane here, and today we're going to be talking about the lore behind Eula. Her character is deceptively complex, and so hopefully I can give you a complete picture. As always, I'll be telling her story in as close to chronological order as possible, so get some snacks, gather around, and let's begin. Our story starts more than 1,000 years ago, when Mondstadt was still ruled over by the aristocrats. Although most clans were corrupt to the core, none were so as openly decadent or depraved as the Lawrence clan. When Venti arrived back in the city around 1,000 years ago after his parting, the city was in an iron grip formed by these noble houses, doing whatever fancied them. They bastardized old traditions, hoarded their knowledge, and violently put down any rebellion that formed. Venti, of course, didn't take kindly to this, and after witnessing the heir to House Lawrence attempt to use the Ludi Harpistrum Festival for an excuse to rape a girl, yes, you heard me right, they were that kind of depraved, he put a stop to it, and, while running, he ran into a slave named Vanessa. She put her life on the line to save him, and for her disobedience, she was given a death sentence along with the rest of her people for saving Venti. They were to fight a dragon who had already destroyed some of Mondstadt's finest. As an added insult, the heir from House Lawrence promised them complete control over Mondstadt if they won, knowing it was a hopeless battle. What he didn't know, though, was that Vinti was Barbados, the Archon of Mondstadt, and with his power, coupled with Vanessa's leadership and grit, they came out victorious, fending off the dragon. Clan Lawrence was fuming, to say the least, but Vinti held them to their word, and they, along with almost every other noble house, were expelled from the city of Mondstadt. That was a massive oversimplification, and eventually, I'll get around to talking about more of Mondstadt's early lore. But, what I just told you there is enough to understand the history of House Lawrence, which is all you really need for today's video. Finally, we come to Eula's part in all this. She was born and raised among this clan, and immediately excelled in what she was passionate about, dance. But her upbringing was so strict, it was borderline abusive. Insane standards, classes on a myriad of subjects she didn't care about, like cooking or etiquette, and a lack of any real personal freedom. The clan was suffocating her, and yet, if she left, she'd be seen as a traitor by her own people and a descendant of evil by everyone else. So she stuck around, mastering the aforementioned talents before moving on to attempt the final challenge a member of Clan Lawrence can make. This challenge is for the prized possession within the clan, their family crest known as the Glacial Seal. This crest has thousands of years of history behind it, and few ever pass the trial to claim it. Eula, although still quite young, passed the trial with flying colors and claimed the crest. And then? And then she left the clan forever. She didn't know where to, but she was done with it, cutting them out of her life in its entirety. She wandered around Mondstadt for some time, a lost spirit who didn't know what they were. She was angry, she wanted vengeance, but at what? Why? She didn't want to reclaim her clan's glory, or even lead anyone, she just wanted to live her life. Anger and vengeance at the world were just habits taught to her by a disgraced clan, but more importantly, they were a shield. She could hide behind those and never settle the issue of her bloodline her entire life. And she may well have done that if she didn't run into a long-forgotten Outrider. Outriders were a task force in Mondstadt that was created by Amber's grandfather, who was a Leeway outcast that moved to Mondstadt after being saved by the Knights of Favonius. The Outriders fell apart eventually, though, as the founder set off on a journey without telling a soul where he was headed. I tell you all this because the Outrider Eula meets is the very same man. She says it herself. I'm an exile of Mondstadt, trained by an outcast of Leeway. From him, she learned open-mindedness and a down-to-earth persistence which she had been sorely lacking in her life. More importantly, she learned to find herself, to put aside labels, shields, habits, and see what was left when she took those away. What she found changed her for the better, and the once wistful soul found purpose and meaning in her existence. She may label it outwardly as vengeance or revenge, but that doesn't change the essential strength she draws from it. When all this was done, she left the first Outrider behind with a vision in her hand and a bone whistle in her pocket, a God-given reward for her acceptance and a final gift from the Outrider. Of course, her story and her troubles don't end here. In fact, we're only just beginning. Eula would wander for some time after until making her way to the city of Mondstadt. There, she did not hide her past, but instead embraced it. The town knew of her family's tainted history and were none too subtle about their distaste for her. She couldn't buy groceries, couldn't go to the bar without most patrons looking on in disgust, couldn't even walk the streets without scorn. Not a great look for the City of Freedom, albeit an understandable one. Yet, one person she met didn't seem to care one bit. The last Outrider, Amber, never judged Eula for her family history. Instead, she made fast friends with the girl and tried to help her in any way she could. When she was barred from buying groceries, Amber would go with her or even buy them for her. When she wanted to eat at a restaurant, Amber would accompany her so they wouldn't spit in her food or burn it to ash. Fitting that the first Outrider would train her, and the last would become the first to accept her and be her friend, is it not? All the while, Eula kept training, both in the arts but also in combat, a skill she mastered under the first Outrider. Her fighting style was unique, based on an ancient dance passed down throughout her clan's history. She learned the dance in her youth, and practiced it daily as a relaxing activity until she'd mastered every movement. And so, when she began fighting with her sword, she naturally had a musical, dance-like style behind her every move. Even those in Mondstadt who hated everything she stood for had to admit, seeing her in action had a certain beauty to it. This led to several knights of Favonius challenging her to duels. When she beat them all, Jean took notice of her skill and asked her to join the knights. Of course, not everyone agreed with this, but there was enough respect in the city for Jean that, at the very least, they wouldn't actively revolt against her for her decision. She was appointed to the Reconnaissance Company, a job that kept her out of the city more times than not. Instead, she was out in the wild, hunting the Abyss Order and any other outward threats that may harm the city. Now, there's one aspect of Eula I've been leaving out so far, and that is intentional. Eula does not give a flying fuck about convincing people of her true nature, at least not outwardly. She knows she's just, and that's all that matters to her. Because of this, she never denies people's claims about her. In fact, she almost plays into them. If people brought up the fact that she shouldn't be in the Knights to her, she'd proclaim that she joined the Knights out of vengeance, and she was going to rip them apart. Of course, we know she doesn't plan on exacting vengeance, at least not in a harmful way, but it didn't exactly help public opinion of her. With that said, she obeyed the laws of Mondstadt at all times, and although she was cold to people, she was never disrespectful or sloppy in following the rules. Over time, people slowly realized that she wasn't doing anything wrong, and the hate slowly simmered down. More and more, they saw her talk of vengeance as no more than figures of speech to shut down their insults. This realization caused many to cease their attacks, growing to, if not like her, at least be somewhat indifferent. These efforts were helped by two key figures. The first is, of course, Amber. She was always by Eula's side, working tirelessly to help the people see the real person behind their perception of her. She'd go to the town square and list off Eula's achievements to try and show people how hard she worked. Amber went everywhere with Eula, treating her as a person and trying to lead by example. The second figure was Jean. She also treated Eula as a companion and a co-worker instead of a spy or enemy, but instead of listing out her achievements to anyone who'd hear, she instead rewarded Eula's hard work and promoted her based on her merits, not public opinion. Spoiler alert, Eula is very good at her job, and for that, Jean promoted her to the rank of Reconnaissance Company Captain. This meant she had people working under her, and they quickly learned to respect her judgment and orders. She actually became famous among her troops not just for her talent and leadership, but also for her cooking. The chef of the Reconnaissance Company even based their field rations off of her cooking, modifying it to be cheaper and last longer while still keeping the same recipe intact. The skill dates back to her childhood classes. You can knock Clan Lawrence's teaching methods, but clearly it got results. Somewhere along the line, she picked up the name Spindrift Knight. Spindrift, for those who are not aware, is the name for the water that sprays from the crests of waves. From the nickname, you'd think she'd wield Hydro instead of Cryo, but the name actually has nothing to do with her element. It instead comes from the bone whistle that Amber's grandfather taught her to use. Let me explain further. Eula is well known for mimicking the crashing of waves using her whistle, a trick which she uses frequently to confuse and terrify groups of hilly trolls before an attack, whenever she's scouting on the coast. A confusing nickname to be sure, although it does have a certain ring to it. These days, people in Mondstadt have more or less warmed up to her, and although some reactionary people continue their judgment, the general consensus is that she's an alright, misunderstood person. That doesn't mean she isn't still judged harshly, but at least she can get a bite to eat without worrying about death threats. Some people will always be against her for her bloodline. Hell, even Twitter is trying to cancel her for her ancestry. Ironic, given that if they're American, there's a good chance their ancestors were slave owners too, but I digress. Most people, though, in-game or out, are beginning to look past her ancestry and instead judge her on her merit. Now, one last thing before we end off for today. Throughout Eula's lore, there's the idea that she's looking for someone who she lost. When talking about Yanfei, she notes that because Yanfei owes her one, she might be able to cash out on that favor and get information. She says something similar when mentioning Lisa, although her pride is too great for her to go to Lisa, of all people, for help. The person she's looking for is a mystery, and we probably won't know for sure until much later down the road, but we can still make guesses. The one that comes to mind is, of course, the first Outrider. It's more than certainly in his nature to leave without a trace, and given how he helped her, there's more than enough motivation for her to want to do so. With all that said, our tale ends here. Hopefully your snacks were good, and so is the video. Have a good one, y'all. Bye-bye.